Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OTD Military History. Today, we are going to be just kind of hanging out, chatting about Operation Veritable, which today, February 8th, almost said August 8th, got Normandy on the brain, obviously. February 8th, 1945 is the kickoff of Operation Veritable, which is 1st Canadian Army's push into the Rhineland. So that's essentially trying to clear the area between the Moss and the Rhine, getting down to Xanten, basically, for 1st Canadian Army and a little bit beyond to clear that area for the push across the Rhine. So what we're going to kind of do is I'll just kind of go through some slides. I've been to this area. I don't have many photos or videos, anything like that, unfortunately. I was doing a tour while I was there and just doing the recce for the tour. And then it was just trying to, kind of get my bearings and all that stuff. So I didn't have time to take down photos. But there's lots of historical photos, lots of footage, lots of good things from that I've been working on a little bit with for those things, and sharing a lot of stuff on Patreon, YouTube channel memberships, and all that kind of stuff. All some extra things there, like 21st Army Group reports. There's all kinds of good stuff, photos, maps. So be sure to check those out if you aren't on that. Doing that helps the channel, helps everything going, keep everything going here at OTD. It also gets you all that extra good stuff that I don't share anywhere else. So we're going to just kind of talk about, I'll go through some stuff, questions as always, about this operation. So for today, what we're going to just talk about, though, is Veritable. And some of you might not know what even I mean exactly. There is, like to say, two parts to this. It was supposed to be one part. The fighting turned out to be a lot more difficult than anticipated. Didn't go as they thought it was going to go. They had lots of time to plan this one. It was supposed to go ahead earlier. But the offensive into the Ardennes, right, threw everybody off, threw them all off. So they had to push it back, and that caused some issues that we'll talk about a little bit. But yeah, there's a lot going on here. Tons of different factors, not a lot of stuff that gets discussed. But being that all said, we'll look at part 2, so Veritable Operation Part 2, basically, which is codenamed Operation Blockbuster. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that at another time. So we'll try to keep this veritable as much as possible, just because there's a lot to hear and a lot to take in and all that stuff. So yeah, it's got a lot of moving parts, is what I'll say here. So I pulled up some stuff to look at this, and we can check out some different things here. So one second here. So what we have here is from the Canadian official history. I still like using their maps the best when it comes to really pretty much all of these bigger operations and everything like that, because I think that they had their map maker was one of the best for the official histories, all that kind of stuff. And they're public domain, so I can use them wherever I like. Yeah, so what we have here is the big picture, right, in Western Europe from February. So it's the entire 2 months of February, March to closing in on the Rhine here. So you can see the various U.S. and British Canadian armies. The two there at the top is the area we'll mostly be talking about is just 1st Canadian Army. But there you can see 2nd British Army, U.S. 9th, which we can talk about very briefly because it is connected to Veritable. And then 1st Army, it pushes famously up to Remagen and all of that. And then 3rd down, right, with 3rd Army with MacArthur, and then working your way down with the 7th and the French. So this is all interconnected, obviously, right? They're pushing on the Rhine. They need to get across the Rhine. It's the last major barrier in the West. It's still a barrier to travel today. It's for those who've seen it. It's big. It was bigger than I was expecting when I first got there. You hear about this stuff, you read about this stuff for years. You see pictures and things like that, but see it yourself. It really does put things into perspective of why it's such an obstacle and what's going on here. So this is, again, a good map to have in mind of what's going on through the months of February and March 45, right? Because this is a lot going on, pushing after basically the Ardennes has ended and pushing forward. So again, good maps, hard to beat these ones. So this is the big overall map that you've probably seen if you've done anything with this at all. It comes again from the history. It's very well done because it's in color, which not all of them were. But this one is. This one's a more confusing version of it. I'll leave it up here as long as I can. But it gives you an area it gives you a feel of what we're going to be talking about and the different, issues that are going on here, right? Because I'm sure you can tell because it's in color at the top there, right? So along the Wall River that becomes the Rhine is flooded. This area is subject to flooding. Obviously not as much anymore. I think because I was there in springtime, later spring, so it was just wet. It's not really, flooded. It's just wet. This is a low-lying area, which is something that's going on here. But the Germans are intentionally destroying dikes, blowing dams, all of that stuff, and that's what slows the U.S. Ninth Army down. Is the flooding further down? So that causes issues. But as you can see here, right, that this area and if you can see the cursor here, 1 second, is the area that 3rd Division, so 3rd Canadian Division, is moving forward in, is flooded, right? That's where the photos, you can see the one behind me, right? You got the amphibious vehicles. They're using those. They have to use them. It's the only way to get around. Some of the towns don't have any roads leading into them left whatsoever. We'll show a photo in a minute here showing what I'm talking about, but that's all there really is. It's a very difficult place to fight as this goes on, and you can see here where it kind of starts to narrow down, and then you have 2nd Division, which is also part of this, right? They're attacking around the area of Weiler, which is on the border today between the Netherlands and Germany. Other than if you're from somewhere else, I'm not really sure how it works in Europe, but that's the only real way to tell the border without really paying attention is your cell phone going off different carriers, and the language changes if you're paying attention. But yeah, that's why I think that was such an interesting area to go through. Weiler is just because the border is all around there. So today, obviously, once you're inside the EU, there it doesn't really matter, but it just gives you some ideas to get your bearings. And then further down south, right, you have the 15th Scottish, because this is a combined army, right? This is a multinational army. I talk about that quite a lot. There's a lot of British forces involved in this. It's called 1st Canadian Army for all kinds of political reasons. It's got a Canadian commander. Actually, this is the largest operation a Canadian commands of all time. Not even comes anywhere close. Like Veritable is massive, the amounts under a Canadian commander. For the first time and the largest ever. It's a lot. So you have the 15th Scottish, the 53rd Welsh, and then the 51st Highland. So these are all well-known names to those who study the British stuff, even to the Canadians. If you're studying Canadian stuff, these names come up again because they're fighting together other places as well. So where the Brits are basically going through is a bit of a different area, right? So this is the Grebstad Heights. Sorry, and I'll answer questions. I'll get back to the other big questions, but the little quick ones I can do. It is a Duke operation. This is just British Canadian forces involved, no American forces. And all in this, the U.S. Ninth Army is having trouble down south with all the flooding. So that's what's going on here. This is the first start. This is just Veritable. This is all of it right here, right? You can see all the different areas attacking. Yeah, so there's a different issue going on further south, right? You have Grebstad Heights. You can still tell the difference of the heights today. It's pretty hard to miss, especially once you say cross down into the low-lying areas and look back. I wish I'd taken more photos. It's extremely striking to see the Grebstad Heights from down there, and why there's such controversy around them with Market Garden, because I shared some photos I found of the area outside Grebstad where the 82nd supply gliders had come in, I think D+1, a Market Garden, and they're still there. They're there while they're doing all of these ops. Some of them are in the way, sort of. I mean, they're just plywood's not really much in the way, but they're on this battlefield. I just think it's an interesting area where these two things have come together and where these names mean different things in different places. So that's a big part of this is the Grossbeck Heights, and then moving your way into what is the Reichswald. It's hard to miss. And Dermot knows tons about this stuff. Obviously, this is his focus. We're going to get him on the channel at some point soon to talk about his book. But yes, it's 99.99 whatever. Small Dutch, Belgian parts of it, and smaller units are integrated and things like that. But this is mostly a Canadian-British show. And there's, I think, some interest. And again, I shared with some patrons and things like that of newsreels talking about who is responsible for Veritable. The British say it's a British operation. I think they say literally almost like purely British, which is weird because it's not true. And then an American newsreel doesn't mention the Brits at all, which I think is interesting. And the Canadian newsreel talks about both, but it's a short little one that doesn't really doesn't mark much at all. Really, it's just quick and some quick footage. And these are all available online. So the Reichswald is extremely difficult. It's an imposing area. If you're driving around that area, it's extremely hard to miss. This is a massive forest by, European standards, almost even by Canadian standards. Obviously, a good chunk of this country is just forest, but this one is massive for what it's going to be. And it's going to be very difficult fighting to clear through there. The Germans are defending harder than they think they're going to defend. At the beginning, there's a lot of some difficult fighting, depends where you are and what's going on. But the Reichswald is one of the harder areas to take. And hence why it slows down the progress, doesn't quite get what they want, because a major part of this is, well, there's two major elements to this. It's based on roads, which is not surprising. So different pronunciations depending on who you are and where you're from and what time. You have the village of Clave or Clava, I've been told it's pronounced by the Germans. I could be very wrong. I'm not entirely sure. So the road connecting that to Gotch, again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that one correctly, but that's how it's called in all the period sources. And then the Gotch to Kalkar Road is also massively important. This is where basically the offensive runs out of steam, is along here. And you can see here that I don't know why the color disappears from the map. I honestly have no idea. It's like that in all the versions. But they run out of, there's no color here. So this is where they run out of steam and some more difficult fighting to take that area. And then they get counterattacked, the Canadians. And this is where they see the German tanks for the first time here, really, in any number. But they're able to hold on because this is also the launch point for Blockbuster, which comes later in February. And then what leads to pushing further down south into the Rhineland. So these roads are crucial. They're so crucial of the day. That's why I like to think about these things, how it keeps you in mind of, how to get around. And at the time, today, it's still the best way to get around through between these two. It's pretty wide open nowadays. It was at the time. It's a nice area to drive through. But the Reichswald is kind of tricky to drive through. You basically have to go around to go through it to get to the other side. It's just easier. Which causes all kinds of trouble. But again, this map is one to study if you want to learn Veritable. This is a good one to look at because it lays it all out. The difficulties, the high ground in the Reichswald, heavily forested, easy to dig into and hold. And that comes up in several different places. One I'll be talking about later on, which is extremely difficult to take with it depends on how you count it, but two major operations to try and clear it is Moylanwood. It's tiny in comparison to the Reichswald, but it's still a tough nut to crack. But yeah, the fighting in here, it takes some time. So I've got some few things I want to show that I think are just really interesting and really bring things into perspective. So actually, I will hold on. My dog is on the move. Sorry. Again. Sorry about that, everybody. He unplugged my light. Okay, I'll just leave it. It's fine. Sorry. Wiggins has different plans than me. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to see some questions here. Okay, Terry, and thanks for your support of the channel. Terry, related question. Oh, I missed one. Sorry, I'll come back to that one because you had one earlier. Why did 30 Corps handle the whole operation? Wasn't 7 divisions too much for a single? Yes. Okay. So, I don't know exactly the nitty gritty of why everyone is technically under 30 Corps at the beginning. I mean, I think it has to do with space. I think it's a huge element of that, right? Like, the 2nd Division is given very limited objectives. Sorry, 3rd Division is given very limited objectives. And so a 2nd, right? So 2nd is just this tiny little slither here from Weiler to Krakenberg, basically. And they're pushed out of line, so they're held off. Well, 3rd has to continue on and keep doing that water stuff that they did in the Scheldt. So I'm not entirely sure. Again, I haven't gone through the documents since I did the tour of this area, which was, I think, 2 years ago now. And I haven't had time to get into them again. But as far as I know, it was just given to 30 Corps because of administration reasons, because there's not enough room for 2 HQs. I don't think that's necessarily what causes the majority of the problems here, because this one's very well planned, it's very well supplied. Right, we had Dave Grebstad on a while ago now talking about the fire plan for this, and it's massive. It's absolutely massive, and this isn't just reflecting backwards either. Like, they were saying that at the time, like the barrage is just something to take in, because it's huge. The amount of guns and the pepper pots, which I've been talking a little bit about recently, are huge. Their support from, Bomber Command, right? Because Clave is flattened, which causes all kinds of other problems. But I'm not sure. I think it's an entirely administration issue. So I don't think necessarily those 2 extra divisions at first, right? Because you have 5 going ahead first, are really causing an issue. And then they go back to the 2 Canadians, go back to 2 Canadian Corps anyway. I was just reading last night, I forget the date, but it's a bit, but it's not too bad. So I don't think it causes much of an issue. To be honest, there's some mistakes made in the Reichswald, but again, I'm not really blaming Horrocks for that at all. It's a tough place to fight when you have a determined enemy, who's fighting on his own territory, really, for the first time. Sorry, I'll get to your second part here. Why was 1st Canadian Army given the job instead of Dempsey's 2nd British? Monty did not like Criar. That's an understatement. And Dempsey was more his style because of the way the line had developed. They wanted to bring 1st Canadian Army is still holding the rest of the wall west of here, around the Nijmegen area, right? That comes later, right? Where they push up towards Arnhem and the fighting over the island. That doesn't come until much later. They're holding this whole area. 1st Canadian Army is holding the left side of this. And as far as I know, they took troops out of 2nd Army, put them into 1st Canadian for that reason, to support it for just Veritable. So they're moving them around because I think that they wanted to. Again, I don't really know why it's picked this way. I mean, it just makes sense logistically wise, because this is where 1st Canadian Army is based around. 1st Canadian Army is holding the Nijmegen salient anyway, and you have to push and clear this part of the Rhineland anyway to get across. Right, they're hoping to grab some landing spots. They don't come until much later, right? Like, Emmerich's not really the objective. They just want to clear it out so they can cut them off and continue the advance afterwards. So I'm not really sure if it was like a personality thing. I think it's just the way it had developed, and that's just the way it is. But I could be wrong. But as far as my understanding is, that it's just this is 1st Canadian Army space, so they're going to push forward instead of just cutting off an entire army and pushing them out of line. It doesn't make much sense, right? Where you could shift 2nd down instead of having 1st go all the way around, because as we know, Market Garden fails and they can't just go that way. They actually had pulled back from some of the gains on what's again called the island to hold the line better. So they don't do this until much later. That's when Arnhem is taken again, right? It's much later. So it's more about space, really, as a lot of these things often are. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of it there, Terry, is there's this limited amount of space, which is even more limited because of the flooding and why they have to go through the Reichswald, right? Because you can't just leave those positions untaken, right? You have to get around and you have to control these roads. which are hugely important because the Germans also need them for moving their reinforcements. It's a massive part of this, but yeah, there's a lot of troops, a lot of everything, logistics, weapons, guns, ammunition, food. They've been building up for a long time and planning for a long time as well. Sorry, I'll see if I caught up on the questions here. Because we're talking about accents. Oh yeah, so Chris, yeah, it makes an excellent point. So yeah, it's Horrick's request to get more troops, which I believe is what's going on. Yeah, I mean, there's armor coming later, but not at the first jump off because it wouldn't have made much sense anyway. It wouldn't have made the difference. That comes later once they push past this flooding and into the more, I want to say flatter-ish. It's all very similar. It's a big open plain in a lot of places, but then you have things that come again later. In like Blockbuster with the Hockwall Gap, again, it has some elevation again. Yeah, so Dermot would know. Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. We don't really know. I'm sure it's just hidden for some stupid reason. No, not really. It's not as far as I know, Andreas. Not really. Yeah. Also, yeah, part of it, Iain, is second. I think it's because of how things develop. The Second Army is given the job of pushing across the Rhine. So first Canadian clears, second goes across. I don't know if it's a prestige thing. I don't think it's really the reason why. I think it's just the logistics of it. And there's that too. So here you go. Okay, so I'll take one more question and I'll try to get back to this, but because I got some good stuff to look at here for the first little bit, but it's hard to say. It's not as many troops are being thrown in here as it was as the Herget Forest. Sorry, I'm changing my answer in my head as I'm going through this. Because it's a smaller area, there's that, right? This is a much smaller area. It's not all forested, right? These areas, we'll see in a second, those flooded areas are flooded. There's nothing else. It's still very low lying today. Farmland mostly still. But no, I don't think it's as messy in terms of that because the advance at the beginning does, the advance does go fairly well. I mean, it slows, obviously. It's not what they want because the Germans are reinforcing the area. And I guess because this could be a good time to talk about Ninth Army real quick. The Operation Grenade is the U.S. Ninth Army's attack, is supposed to go the next day. It's supposed to go February 9th. They can't go because of the flooding. The flooding is so bad, they can't get forward yet. So the engineers are working the best they can to get that flooding under control as best they can. And Grenade doesn't go until much later. So this allows the Germans to reinforce in strength in this area. And this is why the offensive stalls around the Kalkar Gotch Road. And that's the issue here. So they do a pause, an operational pause, restart. So yeah, I've never been to the Herget Forest area. I've seen the photos, I've seen the maps. They are different in a lot of ways. So I wouldn't really say it's apples to apples, to be honest. And yes, and Terry also makes an excellent point. It's not as many divisions attacking as once. They just plug more troops in because they're trying to push through. But yeah, these are a few more get added here, right? You got the 4th Armor and gets added and things like that. But yeah, yes, they did use LVTs. That's in the photo behind me. Sorry, I'm hitting too many things at once. Is the ground frozen? No, it was not. Not frozen in the slightest. Wet, muddy grossness. So I just want to leave this one up here because this comes from the official historical section from the Canadian overseas headquarters in London, from their report on Operation Veritable, obviously. So this just shows the veritable stuff right up to the line here where it's taken, right? Because you can see the hawk weld right here. That's the second part, right? And then Santon and then Wessel on the other side, right? Where this plunder takes place in and around. So this is a great map too. It's a little clearer. Again, share that with YouTube channel members and patrons. So again, I'm guessing here. I'm not entirely sure because again, I was always pressed for time. I think this is Zipflik. Again, I'm probably mispronouncing that. In Germany, it's tiny now. It's not a big place. This comes from those proof sheets, contact sheets, or whatever they're called, from the film and photo unit. Because you don't get a lot of other photos other ways. Like these are digitized, so these are the best ways to get them. Is from these sheets. This is, I think, a good example of this because Zipflik is one of the first towns taken by the Canadians by the Regina Rifles of the 3rd Infantry Division, 3rd Canadian Infantry Division. So I think this just one really speaks to what they're dealing with here, right? It's not typically an island, and most of the town is flooded. At the time, as you can see, I think it is Zipflik just because of the church steeple is pretty unique, and it survives the fighting and more or less intact. But this, I think, really shows what they're dealing with. Their division, right? They are the water rats all over again. Is what's going on here. It's just like the Sheld in some ways. It's even worse because there's really nowhere else to go. And you can see the high ground in the distance, which is why I think this is Zipflik. I could be wrong. The flooding's not super deep. Good question. At its deepest, I don't know. Like it gets bad as this goes on. Like there's a report, I think, and I'll get there in a second, actually, from one of the towns. When they first get there, there's hardly anything. It's where the Chaudière is, so I think it's Louth. I could be wrong. One of the towns. So the Chaudière get to the town, they clear the Germans out. Will predominantly use the basements to hold. And you can see when you're walking through these towns, some of the damage still or what's been repaired. It's mostly ankle level because they're in the basements or the cellars or whatever, and then they just try to mow them down as they come through. The Chaudière take the town. They get cut off by the water. They have to come literally be rescued by the LVTs. To come in and come get them, to get them out there and keep on going. So it's pretty deep enough to get the LVTs to operate. So it's enough to stop infantry from moving. So that, I think, is kind of going to be your barometer there. Sorry, I think I saw a question I want to. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, so I think this is just a cool photo. I've never seen anywhere else. It was in the sheets. I've shared those as well, also with patrons and YouTube channel members. Got to dig through those to find the good stuff. And I think this is a really indicative photo of literally February 8th. So this is the town. This is a sign in the town. Again, probably mispronouncing it. Louth. It's Dutch. Also Dutch at the time. So this is one of the towns we stopped in the tour. So you can see, hold on here. It's right here on the map. And the other areas up here. So this is the town, and these are some other spots. But this is from the offensive. You can see the flooding. So that kind of shows you how bad it is on day one, because the flooding gets worse on day one. And yeah, this one is a good one. Again, I haven't seen these photos anywhere else until I saw this sign. The pockmarked buildings, and this is the church that the sign is out in front of. So that's why I just took a quick picture of this so I can grab as much info as I could on it. And it's just a good place to stop and kind of get a sense of this, because Louth is, again, you can tell it's been hit. You can tell the town has been damaged and flooded. But yeah, it's an interesting area to go check on, and a good place to start. We stopped in this town to kind of get an idea of what it did to the towns, but also to see the advance, because it's there's a field that's great. There's a path that runs along the town, the edge of town, that you can park along and then see and then look back up at the Grebstad Heights and see, this whole flat open land, which is absolutely wild of how wide open it is. And you just get a sense of what they're working on. So yeah, and it's very well marked. There's lots of stuff to know what's going on in this part of the Rhineland battle, basically. And yeah, those photo books are amazing. I try to share those as much as I can as we, get closer to the different anniversaries, right? I think I've shared up until the end of Feb, I think. But yeah, those are all available for supporters. So yeah, this is a good board. It didn't last very long, the flooding. So the damage, I'm not going to say minimal, because I did a little bit of reading and there's some stuff around and things about, recovery from this. The waters recede fairly quickly. I'm not sure exactly how long it takes, but it's not like months and months and months. It's fairly quick because they pump it out back into the Rhine and, out you go. Yeah, it's not too bad, but yeah, you can see on some of the buildings actually still today where the water line was. And also where the damage was, because you can see that they were probably using that spot for almost a bunker and trying to hold off the advance as long as possible. And then clearly something got thrown in there, thrown at it, and it blasted it out because all the bricks are different. So yeah, it's a fascinating area to take it in. Yeah, and it's not salt water as far as I know. It wouldn't be. Yeah, not this far inland. No, it's just that river water from the Rhine. So yeah, the signboard is fantastic. I mean, we literally were running out of time, so we ran to the signboard to get it real quick. Get back to the bus because the tight schedule on the tour. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so this is, if I missed any questions, just shove them in the chat again. I'll just look again. Oh yeah, about the LVTs. No, as far as I know, they didn't use the up armored ones. Just the ones to carry them, because they basically need to get in and get in quick. I don't think they're using them because they I don't know if it would have done much good, to be honest. It's a lot of hit them quick, hit them hard with infantry, because that's what it has to be. I don't think they had any of those. Like, if I'm wrong, please let me know, but I don't recall any of those, and I don't think it was really in the arsenal anyway. As something they had much of. Yeah. So this is a mosaic from one of the war diaries, from the Regina Rifle War Diaries. It might be a bit hard to see on here, but in the middle you have the town of Clave. So this one gets bombed on the night of the 7th, 8th. Bomber Command comes in and flattens Clave. It's hard to tell now, actually. I was surprised. I thought it would look more modern than it did. But they rebuilt it, and it's very nice, and I liked it a lot, and it's very quiet, the Rhineland type little village. But that just kind of helps you get your bearings here, right? So you have Clave here, and the Rhine is up here, right? So this is the area they're coming in. So this is before a lot of, yes, it's a conglomerate map. Mosaic, as it's called at the time, the photo maps. So this is, I think, before the flooding. It's definitely before the bombing, because a lot of the aerial photos they have actually are something I didn't know about, which makes perfect sense, but not until I started doing this recent round of research, is they did a lot of the aerial photography in January 45, a little bit of the end of December. But as we all of us know, right, this winter, the winter of 44, 45, is one of the worst in Western European living memory at the time and for a very long time. So what is really interesting is they're able to take these flights right over all this snowy land, and they can see where they're digging. They can see where the Germans are digging because they can see the dirt on the snow. So that kind of gives away all the defensive position that they can see anyway, right? The ones in the forest, they can't really see. And that's one of the things I've been digging at, and we'll get there in a minute. But I've been looking at that and trying to understand why certain things went the way they did. I've been taking a really good dive at Moylan Wood and kind of what happened there, and why it was so difficult. Right? Obviously, as this is going on by February, it's all gone. Right? The snow was pretty much gone. There is no snow. It's thawed. So it was in that time, like this is mid-January is the latest I saw these aerial photos. And I went through several different sources, which can be a bit frustrating because not everything is labeled, but you kind of do the best you can. And that's how I found those glider photos. Yeah, and that's the thing I want to talk about is the bombing of Clave. Of, you know, is it do any good? What's the point of it? It's bombed to stop the Germans. So yeah, David Grebstad has also looked at this intensively, right, with his article and his work on Veritable, being one of our resident gunners. It was kind of the point, right? It can have. This is like the Khan debate you can have until the end of time, right? Bomb the city. You know, Khan was kind of a mistake. Who's it slowing down more? But this is the high ground, right? So this is why it's so important. And also the Germans are able to dig in here, which makes the fighting more difficult to take it, and why it takes longer than it should have, according to the planning documents, excuse me, to take Clave. And this is where things shift again. This is the area where, if you saw it earlier, excuse me, where 2nd Division is coming up through this area, 3rd bumps down and is now going to be part of this attack. Yeah, I mean, that's as far as I understand it. That's my understanding. I could be wrong. A cup looks funny on my green screen there because my dog locked my light off my table. That's my understanding of it. Is it's supposed to stop the Germans, but it ends up stopping the British advance, the British part of this advance anyway. And there's high civilian casualties in Clave as well. Yeah, so it's another one we can probably discuss and debate and think about for a long time. But yeah, it's also controlling the flank, which is important, but also the flooding, and but also it narrows down the advance. That's the sense I got from this, and it's kind of just the personal anecdote of going there and seeing it and seeing where the towns and everything is set up, and all of that. There's only so many ways to go to begin with, right? As I like to say, without people shooting at you or the war going on. There's a war going on here, so you have to keep that in mind of when you're looking at this stuff, where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. You can't take tanks. Sorry, I'm seeing the conversation. Yeah, no, I heard the guy who did that presentation. He's all right. He's an all right guy, as far as I heard. You know, not really sure. I'm just kidding. It's Dermot who did the presentation. What was I saying? Yeah, getting around. So yeah, you need the roads for the armor, right, and the tail, right. You can have infantry teeth all you like, but they still need the tail. So that's why this is important. You got to get in, clear it out, whatever needs to be done to get the roads. So yeah, I want to show this to kind of give you an idea of what the offensive is based on around here, right? Is Clave and moving down, because you can see the road here, which is a very, very important road in all of this, because that goes down to Kalkar. Yeah, and David is correct. Avenues of approach dictate the planning of attack and defense. Here, in a lot of ways, yeah. Very, very important. Yeah, I read a good chunk of that before going a couple of years ago now. But yeah, that was a big thing that weighed on him. And also the high casualties of the Reichswald as well, right? Because it's Reichswald Cemetery, right? Where the British casualties from this offensive are buried, and one Canadian, but we'll get to that in a bit. One Canadian soldier, lots of Canadian aviators are buried at Reichswald. So this is another one. This is outside Kalkar now. So this is we're getting towards the end. Yeah, sorry, this stream won't be for forever. Where are their rail lines? Sorry, 1 second. We'll go back here. Yes. Hold on here. Yes, there was. It's hard to see in some of the photos. I was trying to line them up, again, depending on the timing, because they're not labeled from the source I have to use, because it's really the only source for 1st Canadian Army aerial photos. There's a canal in the area, and there's rail lines. I don't think they're active. But they're there and causing a few issues for logistics. But once the bombing happens, there's not much going on there anyway. It's the road to the east, southeast. That's more important to move the troops because it's flat and dry. Though the water gets nowhere near it really. Yeah. So yeah, there is. I was trying to line up another photo. I wasn't entirely sure if it was Clave or not because it wasn't labeled at all, and things have so changed now from lining it up. And the resolution of this photo is not the best if you get in close. So yeah, so this one again showing what the flooding has done, right? Because they can break the dikes and all of that along here. You can see the defensive belts that are put in place here. Right, all along here, because this is Kelkar right here. So it's a massively important little area for this, and it's very heavily defended. They're dug in like none other. Yeah, and there's tons of these maps. Again, like I said, they had the time to do the planning and get the recce's and everything, and the aerial and all of that good stuff. So there's tons of maps like this with the overlays of defenses and everything. They're just harder to share sometimes on different places because of just resolution's not great. So when I don't have a ton of good editing software, honestly, I don't have any editing software that's not free. So you can only do so much. You can't really save in higher resolutions, unfortunately. And yeah, there's tons of these ones in that war diary. And I have a few more. I can just like put them up or whatever. Not daily as far as I know, but these are for these are for the 8th, right? These are for the jump off for the beginning of Veritable. So this is where they're supposed to be getting as they move forward. But I don't think they're daily maps, and they're done at the HQ. They're done at various HQs. They're usually done. They can be done at corps level. I know. Maybe it was later. I can't remember if he always had it. I think he did because he modeled it off of Kriar himself. Is Simmons, but that's later, has map making abilities. 1st Canadian Army headquarters has map making abilities. That's where a good chunk of these come from. Some war diarists kept them, some didn't. Right. I think most of these come from the Regina Rifles war diary of all places. Staples. Traveling staples in the Rhineland. No, as far as I believe, no, they're not trying to get there on the first day, but that's phase 1 objective is the Gotch-Kelkar road. They're supposed to continue as part of Veritable past that to work their way and exploit, as these orders always say, right? And this is something that I obviously know, and it's one of those things I like to say, right? You know these things, but when the more you study it and the more you dig into it, it makes sense, right? They are digging in. They get those first objectives are extremely detailed, right? This is the thing, where you got the details. You see these areas, you see the front, you see the Germans. You're wrecking, patrolling all this. You can get those in depth. You can get the aerial coverage of this stuff. So the orders are always more detailed. Phase 1 is always the most detailed. You dig in, you've got to take this going this way here and here, take this little village, blah, blah, blah. Phase 2 is usually less. Phase 3 is usually exploit. And I'm thinking of it in terms of moving towards Xanten, which is further south, is moving your way down and exploit if you can. But that's, again, comes up all the time, and criticisms of plans and leaders and commanders is, the plan's not good. Well, a lot of those plans are the same because you don't know how it's going to go, right? So, it was first day, well, first 24 hours anyway, is take Clave the first day, which is like the mid-range point. I like to think of it in this mind as it develops. Yes, Norma, the squiggly is the flooding coming off of, I forget the name of the canal, but it comes from the Rhine. It all connects from the Rhine and various other dikes. And there's a dam that's destroyed further up. There's a whole bunch of damage to be done here. The Germans are doing what they can slow this down, and it kind of does. So yeah, I like to think of Clave as that midway point, because that's where things slow down, and then push to that Gotch Kilcar road, because it's the start line for blockbusters. So it's very easy to, in my head, keep all this straight of what happens when and how and all that good stuff. But 24 hours makes sense for Clave, and then Kilcar within 48. And harder to go back, but actually, maybe we will. Sorry, avert your eyes for a second. Things are going to get blurry. This is the better one anyway. So you can see here the phase lines of the attack, of how things go, right? So you have phase 1 is Clave, phase 2, which is not how it goes, right? This is phase 2 is supposed to reach here. Phase 2 only makes it this far. And a little bit of exploiting down this way, as we can see here, right? So I think it takes technically 2 days to clear Clave. Could be wrong. I think it's technically 2, the 10th and the 11th. They may reach it on the 9th, the outskirts anyway, if you can even call it outskirts. Sorry, I just got distracted here. Kilcar was recurring topic in German news for many years, but not because of World. Why? Why is that? Interesting. Interested to know. So there is air support. The weather's just not great, as these things tend to go. Oh yeah, the nuclear plant. Yeah, I found a photo of that. That is now a theme park, amusement park, whatever they're called. Yeah, weird place. That's further up though. It's closer to Wessel, I think. Anyway, yeah. So yes, there is air support, but Second Tactical Air Force as these things go. They want to build a new type of reactor there, because I know there's the decommissioned one further up the river that they've now painted the cooling tower to look like an alpine scene. It's I gotta find that photo and share it. It's wild. Anyway, sorry, Scott, distracted. Yeah, there's air support, but not much because of the weather, at least in the first little bit, as far as I know. But Bomber Command does what Bomber Command does, and flattens things before things are going. And just a general question, we have a general map up here from Norma. The timing is more about getting up to get over the Rhine. Yes, there's a bit of delay. Yeah, there is. I mean, technically, yeah, that is the reason why. They want to do the Rhine crossing the right way, right? Again, probably not. I don't attract a lot of Monty lovers here, but they tried to do it, I like to say, the cheap way with Market Garden, and we know how that went. So you had to do it properly, and that's what they did, right? So you have to get Plunder to go ahead first, and then you do Varsity. So that's why. That's why there's also this clearing taking place. It's all in goal is to get across the Rhine properly, and in strength to keep pushing, and that's exactly what happens, right? New type of reactor. It's new type of reactor. That's interesting. It is wild. Not even because of German and stereotypes. It's just so weird looking. And like they built a hotel, part of I don't even know the terminology of the control buildings. It was wild. It's wild to look at. I gotta find those photos. It's crazy. Anyway, yeah, so we can go back to moving forward here a little bit. But yeah, it's absolutely nuts to think about that stuff. Okay, yeah, so this, wait, I did want to do, was this the map? Yes, okay, so real quick, so a video I am working on that I do want to get into detail about is, we probably not see it the best here, but it's the town village, really, it's still tiny, Moylan. It's got I guess, castle, technically, with a moat that gets damaged somewhat. sorry, I'm just reading this. Get distracted. Not as far as I know. No, because they had to get the flooding under control, and if you don't get the flooding under control, yeah. Well, so Monty gave British credit for stopping the Ardennes offensive, so we should probably take what he says with a grain of salt, and a huge chunk of it anyway. Anyway, so sorry, Moyland Wood. That's the video I'm working on. That's where I found all these good stuff and trying to do these aerial photos and trying to work my way across, right? Because it's in this weird no man's land middle area between Clave and Kelcar. And it's an intense battle. The Scots get there first. It's their objective to move down this road here. Right next to it, you can see it here as it gets into Kelcar. They don't do well. It doesn't go well at all. And it doesn't go well for the 3rd Division either, 3rd Canadians. They're brought up and given the objective. One of the things I'm looking at, and I think if Chris is still watching, he made up a good point that it wasn't their objective, the 3rd Division's objective to take initially. It just seems like they didn't think it was going to be an issue. There's very little planning around it. Hardly any wrecking done in the sense, I mean, it's a wooded area. It still is today, mostly. It's a golf course now. It surprised me the amount of golf courses in this Nijmegen area. There are so many of them. So many of them in this area for some reason. Maybe the flat open land. I don't know. Anyway, so it's a golf course now. But it's still hilly, mostly wooden. Defender's dream, particularly fanatical defenders that, were the Fallschirmjäger who are brought up to defend that area. So they have a huge issue of trying to figure this out. And I'm going to get into it in the video, but it takes the Canadian standby of flame and bayonet to clear Moyland Wood. They throw in 2 battalions plus armor to make it happen. For which, if you see it today, I mean, I think it's an 18-hole golf course, maybe less. I don't know. I didn't really take a close look because there's another one across the road. So I don't know if they combined, it gets confusing. Anyway, doesn't really matter. It's just you can still get a sense of what this battlefield is like. And it's, I maybe this is the North American in me, but see these old forests in Europe, it's like Hansel and Gretel territory to me. Expect a candy house with a witch living in it. And it's just, they seem darker and, fuller and all that good stuff. I don't know. Yeah, it's a fascinating little area. So I've been digging into that. I don't want to go into that anymore, but it's a thing that slows this down. And that's another part of this is the heavy defense. And that's why I wanted to look for how this develops, right? And looking at a different area, because there's tons of stuff on it actually for being such a little area because it's such a difficult fight. And lots of controversy, but thanks for coming out, Chris. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's good. Patrick, I don't know. That's a good question, though. Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe. A lot of farmland in this area still. The towns are expanding, a good chunk of them, which is nice to see. But yeah, it's a cool little area. I like this area a lot, actually. I really, really enjoyed my time in the Nijmegen area, coming this way. Food was great. People were awesome. Yeah, and then going even further down, but we can talk about it later. But like Hockwell Gap is like a trail hiking area. I mean, there's hiking areas through this as well, but it was awesome. Yeah, and sorry, I just wanted to speak briefly about Simpson. Yeah, I think he's underrated, extremely underrated. Is that a symptom of his personality? And just, get the job done. Don't worry about the PR of it all. Is that because he's under Monty and 21st Army and group? I don't know. I don't know. It's a fascinating one. Not a lot of ton of work being done there. I know some people are doing some work on it now, which is good to see. I was digging in a little bit of 9th Army stuff, but it was pushing across the Rhine. There wasn't as much on getting to the Rhine. There were some reports, some Patron reports, and actually there was an entire month missing. It was weird. I don't know what's going on there, but it was a weird thing. But yeah, I was doing some reading on that, and it's the engineers do a huge role for the 9th Army in getting this stuff done. That's just not a surprise, right? Look at this stuff and what needs to be done. Sorry, I'm just kidding up here. Yeah, it's a great city. I love Nijmegen. Oh, Hodges too. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's some power craze. Anyway, getting distracted. But yeah, so I'm working on Moyland Wood. I'm going to try and get it out as fast as possible. A bit harder because I took on some more work. Things are busy. So I probably won't be a super long video, but I do want to get something out on Moyland Wood because I found some good stuff. And it's a tough fight. Super tough. And they try literally everything they can. Because by this point, they do have armor in the support, but it doesn't make much of a difference. Just because of the terrain. And the Germans just dig in. And this is a good place to dig in because when I took the Juley group there, it's a golf course, so they ran off the hills and they found they think they were foxholes. They call them foxholes. I try to tell them slip trenches, but they think they found them, and they probably did. There's a ton of them in that area because they were dug in like nobody's business, and the Canadian Scots dug in a bunch as well. So crazy stuff. So this is just the map again out of the official history. So this is looking at Moyland Wood and then to the Gotch Kilcar Road. And this is where the 116th Panzer Division comes online and actually does hit at them with armor. But I can cover that really maybe sometime else. Well, there's artillery support all through this, Scott. Lots. If Dave Grebstad's still here, we did the show with him. You can watch that after. Because Dave wrote a whole article about it. Obviously, he knows his gun and stuff. Yeah, there's a lot. A lot of guns. A lot of guns being used here. But yeah, so this is, again, 2nd Division now. It's coming up and trying to hold this line. And they get counterattacked pretty hard. Pretty hard. Sorry, I'm just reading a question here. Forgive me for not getting caught up on some Rivet County stuff, but have you found any indication of one of the Sturm Tiger units being in the area at the time? No, not. It's coming back to me now. No. Oh, Jesus, it was 2 years ago now. I remember hearing about this, but I don't think I found anything. I don't think it's definitively proven. I could be mistaken. But I don't think so. That might have been a rumor. I don't know. Honestly, I don't remember. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you. But I looked at that one a long time ago. That was well over 2 years ago now, because I was doing the really little nitty gritty stuff. But yeah, I do remember hearing about that. As far as I know, they're never brought back up to strength. They're battle groups, right? They're doing the best they can. I don't think they're up to strength ever again. I could be wrong again, but I don't think they're up to strength. Yeah, I don't think so. And yeah, I could do a Moyland show, get into more details of it once I get some more time to get all of that done. My see-through cup there because my dog knocked over my light. He's a troublemaker. It's a fascinating battle, right? You can see here, this is the area. Moyland's actually not part of the fighting. It's just the forest part that runs along this main road and why it needs to be taken, right? Because this is the Gotch Kilcar Road. So this is why it's so important. And you can see it today when you get there. It's just straight line, easy to see. And you go, yeah, makes perfect sense. Also because this town, Louisendorf, I'm probably mispronouncing that as well. It's a funky looking little town, right? Because it's literally the shape. it's not, the roads don't cross through. It's big open center. It's funny because also it's a good way of finding mark when you're trying to figure stuff out. But this is where they get to, and this is where they hold, because this is where the armor gets up to, is this side, because they have to come around. But yeah, it's a fascinating stuff. If you don't know this stuff or you want to do more digging, yes, it's bigger than Alamein. The artillery support is a lot bigger. Sorry, yeah, just going back to yeah, we'll still combat effective, yes, but the more casualties they take, right, the less they can do. Especially at this point, right? Because they're literally running out of room. This is another thing I when I was really getting into this to lead that tour is thinking about this, right? You're literally running out of space, right? The further back you go, there's less places for the Germans to go. The Rhine is right there. So like, and if you can't get across when they're trying to take out these, you're done. You're either dead or you're PW. And for those fanatical units that are still in the area, those are not good options. They'd rather take the death than the capturing, a lot of them. And that's why places like Moylan Wood are so difficult. But yeah, they're just running out of space. So you just do whatever you can to hold. So this is why I think they're fighting outside, outsizing their numbers. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading. Support infantry division attacks the Canadians. Yes, they did. The Canadians get support here. But the doctrine right at the time is armor doesn't stay up on the front line at nighttime. It goes back in harbors because they harbor around Louisendorf. And this is when they get hit by those counterattacks because the Germans are moving past doctrine at this point and are doing whatever they need to do based on what the situation is giving them. So they hit them hard in the darkness, or I think it was around twilight or something like that. Again, I can do more later because this is all interconnected, obviously. But yeah, it's a perfect spot for a counterattack. But the Canadians use it to their advantage, right? Because they have the integrated anti-tank guns. They use those to great effect here and cause all kinds of trouble for the Germans because they don't have the armor with them. Right, the armor comes up later, and then they put those anti-tank guns to use. I think it's a company of the Royal Regiment of Canada is completely overrun. One of them hangs on, or it could be flipping them. One of the companies gets completely overrun. One falls back, and this is where they're able to use the anti-tank guns to really hold them off. And same with the Rileys. The Rileys are, I think, underrated in a lot of ways. Royal Hamilton Light Infantry. Like they're the ones that Verrier and Operation Spring are really the only ones who are successful in their objectives. This is another one where they're doing fairly well. As well, they're able to hold them off pretty well. Yeah, I mean, again about the Sturm Tiger, or however it's pronounced. I don't know. It's just rumors. I see it a lot in online discussions, but yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things hard to tell in this time period. It's everything's falling apart for the Germans, right? Not so much in this area. No, I don't think so. Hard to say because again, this is such a small area, and they get to the relatively speaking, they're still late, but they're able to basically cut off the Kilcar Road, and that's it, right? That's the only avenue of reinforcement because the artillery also plays a role here too, right? So I don't think so. Not in this regard. This is a stand as long as you can, cause as many casualties as you can, get back. And then there's obviously the counterattack later, but I don't think it really does them much good. But again, that's my assessment. I'm not the gospel here. Yeah, exactly, James. That's a good way to put it. Once you're in the red zone, you're out of space. What are you going to do? That's good for defender. Less areas to cover. That's a good question, Norman. I don't know. I don't know. I'd love to see what the German, like if there's a German, like historians or amateurs or whoever working on the Rhineland stuff. I've seen a little bit, but not much. Not a ton of the German perspective and all of this. A lot of them just don't make it out. Yeah. There's a lot of work is done on practicing even before Normandy and getting that down because they know about German doctrine and what the Germans try to do. They know that this anti-tank role, and that's why there's those integrated units to begin with. As they save, I don't know how many Canadian lives and overall by having those integrated. It's Yeah, it's an important part of this, especially this. Once they get into this open ground, I'm just thinking about when I was there. It's just wide open. There's nowhere to go, especially on the attack. There's nowhere to go. That's why I got to use the cover, the darkness. Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah, maybe a Sean Moylan. Definitely a shorter video because I have something else I have to get done by the end of the month. But and that anniversary is within 8 days. It is approaching when this all sort of kicks off. So I'll see what I can do to get that done as quickly as possible. So just really quick, another thing I wanted to talk about as well is this cemetery. I have most of the photos on my phone, and I didn't have time to do before the show, unfortunately, to put more on my computer because I also half destroyed my desk 2 minutes before we started. Knocked everything everywhere, so I had to clean up. So this is a photo of the Grebstad Cemetery on part of the Grebstad Heights, just outside of town. There's every year, people in the town or whoever's in the area will walk from the center of town to the cemetery. I think it's a couple kilometers, and do there for the ceremony on the 4th of May. 4th, yeah, 4th. For the remembrance, right? And it's a big thing. I was with the Canadian Army units there. It was something to behold. But this is where the Canadian Army soldiers are buried. They are buried here. They're not buried in the Reichswald or other places. They were purposefully brought back to the Grebstad Heights. They wanted, again, there's rumors, but I have seen the paperwork from Kriar as Commander 1st Canadian Army. You didn't want Canadians resting on what was enemy soil. They didn't want them there. I found one in the Reichswald. I looked into the records as best I could. Couldn't find out the reason why the soldier, I forget his name. Maybe I can do something with it later once I get the materials back together again. One Canadian soldier is buried in the Reichswald. I looked at the records of him and the Commonwealth War Graves records. He's found basically in a slit trench outside Grebstad. Maybe they think he's British. It's unclear why he's put there. I think his concentration of moving the graves was later, so he's taken to the Reichswald and is left there. Once in turn, they don't move them. So I think that's what happened. There's one. And if anyone's been to the Reichswald and knows about the casualties, it's massive. Like it's huge. It's literally come in the middle of the forest. Boom, there's this massive cemetery. But this is the Canadian cemetery. I didn't have any easily accessible photos of the Reichswald on my phone or anything like that. I don't know where they went. But this is just a quick shot of Grebstad. So again, Kriar didn't want Canadians buried in Germany. I've also heard because this is literally up on the heights. If you go to the back of the cemetery, in the photo there, you can sort of see it. That's a Canadian flag there, and the Cross of Sacrifice. You can see down in to Germany, and I've heard that is part of it too, right? Is to look upon, look down, so the Germans know what happened. Basically, can't deny what happened. Again, I'm not really sure. I was told that by some local people while I was there. Ran into two sisters. They said they were kids, like really, really, really young kids. When the war ended, so I think can't remember, like 6-ish. So they don't really remember much, but they remember the cemetery being made, and people from the town were employed to come and help do it and everything, and some of their family members were part of it. And anyway, it was just a very interesting story to hear of someone really local. She said, like, we used to live, like, she's like, right there, that farm building, it's on the further side here, on this side of the cemetery, because there's houses down the valley. She's like, we used to live right there. So I was like, oh, wow, okay, that's amazing. So yeah, it's just to get the stories you get to hear, and especially in the Netherlands, this is, and I was there around when the ceremonies are being done and the remembrance is being done, and then the celebrating on the 5th. Fascinating to hear these people talk about this and see the support it's still given, and it's big. I'm not sure the number of graves. Sorry, It'll be on the website. I don't remember, but it's a lot. This is only, it's 3 major sections. Is 1, 2, and then the third one is way over there. It's a lot. And thank you for the support. Means a lot. Thank you so much. So yeah, so that is Veritable. Really quick. It's only an hour. I don't want to talk too much longer. But yeah, there's lots of things. Lots of questions I have about this one. It's a big op, massive op. Lots went into it. So much going on. So many different moving parts, different units, different phases of the fighting, different terrain, all within this small area. And this isn't even Blockbuster. Blockbuster is a whole other different type of fight in a lot of ways as well. Further down the Rhine, it's a bit of a difficulty they have getting into some bigger stuff going on there too. It's a fascinating one to me. I wish Veritable got more attention. It doesn't really. Obviously, I know people here know it. There's a ton to look at here, and one that I'm always fascinated in. But thanks again, but Herbie. Yeah, not everybody knows Herbie. Love a little bit of Herbie. I think there's a book out of Canadians, Lee Valley of all places, sells a book on the collected comics of Herbie. I've never seen it anywhere else. Why Lee Valley that makes tools? I have no idea. Super weird. I don't even think it's on Amazon. Super weird. But yeah, Herbie's is a good one to possibly look at when I get some more time, which hopefully is in later spring. But I'm getting, not yelling at, but people want those Normandy videos that I missed, that I still have to make. People want those, especially Brettville. People are clamoring for Brettville. So I saw some questions, so I will answer those. Any questions, please go ahead. We're kangaroos. Yes. Kangaroo. Oh, rams. Yes. Yeah, definitely. By this point, especially. Yes. I posted, I can't remember. I think I posted on YouTube as well, a passage about, I think it was from the 21st Army Group report, about how the ram kangaroo, or the kangaroo in general, was the most, important development for the infantrymen since the switch to the musket or something like that. Can't remember the wording off the top of my head. It was interesting that at that point it had such an importance. I mean, maybe we think about APCs as being integral now. At the time, no, but they are using them later. I think they're using the Hubbell gap, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about that. I can look at that for Blockbuster. That's another bit of a mess. It involves Chris Folks, who I'm not a fan of, because he was a bit of an idiot. So yeah, that one I think they're more there because they're able to bring them up. It's not flooded, so that makes a huge difference. I mean, it's muddy, but it's not flooded, which is a huge difference. Yeah, which is unfortunate. It's not talked about, and why there's not interest from the Bundeswehr. You'd think they would be, because we need some. I've seen some, very little, and it was in English, but it was not much, which is unfortunate. But yeah. Trying to get Andres to write a book. I'm always trying to get people to write books. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's unfortunate. Well, it just started today. I don't know, maybe more later. They'll talk about it more towards the 4th of May. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I can't say for sure. Yeah. He's cartoon character who's like the Canadian. There's not really an American equivalent, is there? What's that guy's name? Like, the stand-in for every Canadian soldier, basically. It's called Herbie. He did everything. He's everywhere. Yeah, I got his autobiography on my desk over here. Willie and Joe, that's a name I couldn't remember. Yeah, there's a lot of them. A lot of them. Not like Kilroy, no. It was in the Maple Leaf, which is the newspaper. Bill Malden, that's it. Yeah, more like, snafu-ish. Kind of more like a Willie and Joe type, kind of more ish. I don't know, it doesn't really, not the same, but it was like Canadian specific, Canadian problems, the Canadian issues, and right, because it's covering two different areas, and he's still used in things. This is fascinating. So yeah, if there's any more questions, please. Yeah, we have ways, I think. Yeah, I mean, yeah, hard to get there across for other people. That's the problem. Yeah, I've seen that too. Hopefully May does a little bit. Veritable doesn't get a lot of attention. I mean, it doesn't get attention here at all. Nothing gets here. D-Day got attention. That's it. Pretty much ended after that. We don't talk about anything else. I try my best. I am, but I'm one man. I do my best, and there's just a lot to cover. But it's an interesting one. Blockbuster's got a lot more going on. The Hockwell Gap is an interesting one to me. To me, it's like a bigger version of the Gully in Ortona. It's just, there's a lot here. It's complicated. It's not glamorous. This is like shelled, but in some ways worse, I would argue. Luckily, it's shorter. Luckily, I'm not saying the Shelled is not bad. I know how bad it was. This, just in certain ways, is just brutal. Just brutal fighting, brutal violence. The things that needed to be done to take these tiny little towns. How to clear things like Moylan Wood. Like, I guess we're towards the end here, but like, what they have to do is literally take universal carriers, the flamethrowing version of Wasps, put them up front, and burn their way through the forest. That's it. That's the only thing that works. Artie did not get them out. They tried. They tried to go around. Didn't work. They just got flared on from the flanks. It just didn't work. It's brutal. So that's why I want to look at Moylan Wood, because I think it's an interesting little piece of this massive story, which I can only do so much to tell, and especially I ran out of time because the anniversary is now. It's a lot. Anyway, yeah, so it's a lot. I mean, maybe the reason, it's missing controversy, maybe. No shade to my American friends here, but it's no Americans involved. There's no Canadian, no Americans involved. Most Americans don't give a shit. Battle of Britain has never been popular in the United States until they shoehorn Ben Affleck into it for horribly in a certain movie. I think that's a big part of it. It's Canada, as I don't know how long you've been with us on the channel here. I've been talking about this for years now. Canada does a shitty job of telling our own stories. We don't support this really at all. I mean, the stuff that's done at Grebstad is all done by local people. I don't even know if they give Veterans Affairs support, which is not good. Like, you can, I don't know if I can go back here. Hold on, just a real quick anecdote here. You can sort of see them here. These little placards next to the gravestones. Those are the faces of those who are buried there. They want everybody. They've been working on that for years. I don't know if it'll happen. I mean, obviously one or two might not happen, but that they're doing it. They're doing it all on their own. I don't think they get much support from any Canadian government organizations anyway. We just don't tell our own stories, and this is no different. Veritable is no different. Crossing of the Rhine is no different. We talk about the liberation of the Netherlands, the flag waving and the flowers, and that's pretty much it. Sorry, to see if there's any questions I missed. That's fair. Issued or those are issued. Those are issued. Yeah, they need them. They need a lot of them for this, because that's the doctrine: is get in, take your objective, dig in, and hold, because they know the Germans are coming. That's the thing with being predictable in your counterattacks is you know what you need to do to stop them. And this is why the anti-tank guns become so important. The heavier weapons, like the mortars, having those support units are huge here. And that's later on. Those are the later op advances. At the beginning, they just blow the German line to pieces. But then later on, they need them. Yeah, I mean, I was it last year or the year before I did some stuff, and I wanted to see if I couldn't find anybody. I literally could not find a single person who was still alive who was working on Operation Grenade. I think Woody had somebody on World War II TV who is doing stuff on Simpson. I don't think their focus is just Grenade. I think, I don't think he's doing just Grenade. I think he's doing Simpson, period. I think he's doing like a biography or something. So it's unfortunate because it's an important part of this and why the advance to the Rhine goes the way it does and plunder goes the way it does. And we just kind of don't look at it enough as we should. No, it's not because Canada is a pacifistic culture. I don't buy that. I also don't think we're a warmongering culture. People like to tend to take the middle ground, which is the peacekeeping. That is a big thing here. Everyone knows the peacekeeping, even when it was at its height, it was still less than half of not even half of a half or something like that of Canadian military expenditures, involvement, numbers, whatever. It's that peacekeeping is clean-ish. It's good for PR. You're not the one doing the war. There's some government things involved in that in the 60s, the late 60s, and I don't want to get into now. But no, it's not because we're a pacifistic culture. I mean, look at hockey. It's not that. I think it's something else. It's a deeper problem. To me, it comes back to money, but that's Canada for you. Yeah, trenching tools are never people are never happy to use them. Shovels are usually better, and as far as I know, they were issued. Yeah, things in labor, sir. Death, taxes, and German counterattacks. Ain't that the truth? Yeah, nobody talks about grenade. Too cold in Canada. We embrace the shenanigans sometimes. Sorry. Yeah, we've got some bad stories of what happened to some of our peacekeepers. Anyway, sorry, I'm just reading. Okay. Yeah, so thanks everyone for hanging out. So yeah, this was just a quick overbrief. I was going to say, I don't know if I said it earlier, but if you want to learn more about Veritable, the best place I argue, because of the price, is the official Canadian history. It's old and it's got some issues, but it's free online, so you can't beat the price. It's fairly well written as well. It's fairly engaging for being official history. It's the best place to learn about this stuff. Like I said earlier, I shared some other more in-depth stuff with patrons, YouTube channel members. So if you want to get access to that while supporting my work, so I can keep looking at these different areas and stuff that people don't talk about as much and cover as much as I can, support there means a ton. I just started working on my taxes again. That's always this time of year that brings things around of what I need to do to keep this stuff going. And more patron support would be great to have. Patreon's the best way to support me, and you get tons of stuff. I try to share as much as I can there all the time, and I'll be finding more, especially about Moyland Wood. I want to start working on that video ASAP, maybe a bit tomorrow, and maybe I'll share some more stuff I found there because it's fascinating stuff. And I'm always finding good stuff about different topics as well. So it's a good place to check that out. I don't really share that anywhere else anymore. Anyway, yeah, so thanks for hanging out. Keep an eye on here, social media. I'll be probably planning a blockbuster show later towards the end of the month, kind of lining up with the anniversary. It might not line up perfectly, but yeah, so thanks everyone for hanging out. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday now, Saturday evening for our friends over across the pond and anybody over here. And enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, weekend, whatever you have. I hope you enjoyed this. And yeah, tell your friends to support OTD if you can. All right, I'll see everybody next time. Bye, everyone.